Hello, welcome to Friday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, and on screen we've got a puzzle by Nylimb. Now this puzzle I think only appeared a day or so ago on Logic Masters Germany, and I have been, well, inundated is probably slightly too strong a word, but I've had several emails saying that please can we do this puzzle. I've noticed it has a 100% rating on Logic Masters Germany, so it's extremely highly thought of by those people who've solved it, some of whom I really, I rate very highly as setters as well. I'll read you a little piece that Richard Stolk wrote about this puzzle in just a second. Firstly, I want to give a big thank you actually to those of you who took part in our Ask CTC session on Discord last night. So Mark and I, we went onto our Discord server, which you can, if you've not been on there, you should have a look at it. It's a really stunning community of puzzle setters and puzzle solvers. I think it's it's something like 2,500 people are on this Discord server at the moment. And yeah, we did a little thing where we asked, people asked us questions and we tried to answer them as best we could, and it was great fun. So do check that out, and we will try and repeat that whenever we can. Now let me tell you a bit more about this puzzle. So this is the comment from Richard Stolk about when he solved this puzzle. He said, wow. Recently I've solved quite a lot of Sudokus, and I rated a lot of them with 5 stars for beauty. For this gem, it's a pity that 5 stars is the maximum, since I really think this is worth at least 6 stars. So this is really stellar praise from one of the world's great constructors. So we must be in for a treat with this puzzle today. There was also a very amusing comment, I thought, from Big Tiger. And Big Tiger actually invented this type of Sudoku, which is called a battlefield Sudoku. And I feel guilty actually that I've not covered Big Tiger's original puzzle yet, and I will try and do that. If I can't do it on the main channel, what I'll do is I'll do it as a bonus Patreon solve for you guys. But Big Tiger's comment was he's utterly clueless about how to lock down the first digit in this puzzle, and he invented the variation, so it must be seriously tricky, I think, this one. Let me read you the rules. We need to fill the grid, well, basically it's normal Sudoku rules. Consider the first X cells and the last Y cells of a row or column, where X is the number in the first cell and Y is the number in the last cell. A clue outside the grid gives the sum of the digits where these groups overlap, or the sum of the digits in the gap between the groups if they don't overlap. Right, so let's look at this 7 clue, for example. What this is saying is that whatever we put in this square, let's say we put a 6 in this square, that's saying take these 6 cells, and let's say we put a 5 in this square, that would be saying look at these 5 cells. And the 7 clue is saying, in this case, because these 6 and 5 overlap, they overlap in these 2 positions, this 7 clue is saying that these 2 cells sum up to 7. Now let's change this. Let's imagine we proved that this cell here was a 1. Then it would be saying that because there's a gap between the 2 areas, the 1 would just occupy this square, the 6 would still occupy the first 6 squares. These 2 cells would have to add up to 7. Now, of course, we don't know before we start whether each of these clues is a gap clue or whether it's an overlap clue, and that's obviously going to be part of the challenge. Do have a go at this. As I say, 100% rated for beauty. It must be very special. With that, let's get cracking. Now, the place my eyes are drawn immediately is look at all these zeros across the top. These must be important. And yeah, okay, so a 0 clue means that the 2 opposite digits in these columns have got to sum up to 9, because we know that whatever the area is from the top, it must exactly meet the area from the bottom in order that there is no gap and no overlap, which must account for the 0 clues. So actually, look at that. We can say with certainty that down these columns the yellow squares add to 9, which means they don't contain a 9, of course. So the 9 in row 1 must be in one of those 4 cells, and the 9 in row 9 must be in those 4 cells. Right, so what does that tell us? Obviously, wherever a 9 appears, it generates an overlap clue, because if, for example, this square was a 9, it would be looking at all of those squares. So whatever we put in this cell is going to overlap with the yellow area. But I'm not actually seeing how to use that at all, though. Let me go back to looking at this one. Right, here's some more logic. These yellow squares, because each column adds to 9, these yellow squares must add to 5 lots of 9. That's 45. So, it's not. I don't think it's helpful, but it's quite interesting. If these yellow squares add up to 45, we can ask a question. Let me just colour those in. What does row 1 and row 9, what do these rows sum to in the grid? Well, because any row of a Sudoku will contain all of the digits from 1 to 9, if you add those digits up, you get 45. So these 2 rows of the grid sum up to 90, but the purple squares sum up to 45. So these squares also sum up to 45. Oh, somebody's ringing my doorbell. 1 second. Okay, here is my tip for life. Make sure that your doorbell has a battery that works in it. Otherwise, people bang on the door progressively loudly until you run downstairs to see what they're up to. Right, what were we looking at? This was... Okay, yeah, I was trying to look at these squares. And I was noting the yellow squares here have to add up to 45. Now, that is absolutely useless. 8 cells adding to 45? No. No, I've got no clue how to use that, I'm afraid. Right, we'll look down this side of the grid then. So we've got a lot of small digits. So we've got one row that adds up to 9 for sure, and lots of rows which can only have, well, yeah, okay, hang on, I'm going to just delete this for a second. It's distracting me. If we think about a 2 clue, how can a 2 clue be generated? It's either got to be an overlap of exactly one cell. So, you know, if this was a 6, this would be pointing at this square. We'd have to have an overlap of one square, because you can't make 2 cells in the same row add up to 2. It's got to be one cell. Right. Okay, I'm starting to remember some of the logic from the last puzzle, because what that means is if you have a 1 cell overlap or a 1 cell underlap, so what would that look like? That would look like, I don't know, this being a 5 on the other hand and this being a 3. That would work. Let's make that one. So in order to have a 2 clue, you have to either make sure these digits add up to 8, or they have to add up to 10. And the same is true of a 1 clue, isn't it? Because a 1 clue must be a 1 cell overlap. So there isn't much choice about a lot of these rows. We know for certain, let me just delete these conjectures. We know for certain that these two squares add up to 10, these two, or 8, these two squares add up to 8 or 10, these two squares add up to 8 or 10, these add up to 8 or 10. So all of the yellow squares add up to 8 or 10 by row. And this one, on the other hand, adds up to 9. So the minimum the yellow squares add up to is 7 lots of 8, which is 56. So plus the 9 would be 65. Right, okay, that's not possible. That's definitely not possible, because in that situation, in order to make column 1 and column 9 both add up to 90, the two cells at the bottom, these two squares, would have to add up to 25. That is absolutely clearly impossible. I mean, even if I put 8 and 9 in there, that only adds up to 17, and there's no way that obeys the strictures of the 8 clue. So, actually, let's look. If we do it the other way round, if these squares are not adding up to 8, but they're adding up to 10, there are 7 lots of 10 is 70, plus 9 is 79. These two have to add up to 11. So these two cells have to add up to 11 or more. But they can't add up to much more. So these two yellow squares, well, the 8 clue is an overlap clue for certain, because these two squares have to add up to 11 or more. And you can't make 8 in 4 cells. So we can't make this a 4-cell overlap, so we can't make this add up to 13. This has to either add up to 11 or 12. That does feel like it's important. Now, if it adds up to 12, we've got a 3-cell overlap, so that's going to have to include a 1. And if it adds up to 11, we've got a 2-cell overlap. But it can't be a single-cell overlap. That is not possible. And what's more, an awful lot of these digits have to add up to 10. Otherwise, we'll just simply break this row of the grid. Oh, no, 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 no! All of them have to add up to 10. Because if all of them don't add up to 10, if I make one of them 8, I've got 6 lots of 10, plus 8 plus 9. That's 77, and then this has to be 13. You can't make any of these cells 8. Because if you do, you lose 2 degrees of freedom in the 8 clue, and you can only lose 1. That is unbelievable. So this clue is an 11 clue for certain, and these are all 10 clues. So we've got 7 ways. Well, what do I do now? That's very interesting indeed, but it's not actually solving the puzzle. There's still, the yellow squares have immense... Oh, no, 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 hang on. No. Right. here's something. The yellow squares cannot include a 5. They cannot include a 5. And how many 5s are there in column 1 and column 9? There are 2. So this is an X-wing on 5s. These squares either have a 5 here and a 5 here, or a 5 here and a 5 here. Which means that the 0 clue, the 0 clue definitely has a 5 here or here, and these two squares have to add up to 9, so they have to be a 4-5 pair, and we've entered something in the grid after 15 minutes. Right, okay, and these two have to have a 5 in the grid as well, so these two add up to 11, so these have to be 5 and 6. So now look, we can start to use the column clues all of a sudden, because now this clue, which is a 0 clue, we know these two squares add up to 9, so this is a 3 or a 4. And this clue, we could use either the 2 clue now or the 9 clue. The 2 clue adds up to 10 because we know that it's an overlap clue. We needed 10 for all of the clues down here apart from the one that we knew was 9. So this one is a 6 or a 7. Now the 9 clue is going to give us our first digit, because we can see we've got a 6, 7 and a 5, 6. So we definitely have a sum that's greater than 9. So we have an overlap clue. What is the maximum number of overlap cells we could have in a 9 clue? Well, it's 3. We could make 9 with 3 different digits, like 2, 3 and 4, or 1, 2 and 6, or 1, 3 and 5. But we can't make 9 in 4 different digits. Therefore, the sum of these two cells has to be less than 13. But if we make this a 6, that has to equal a 7, and that because it can't, obviously we can't repeat the 6 in the column. So this can never be a 6. This is a 5, and we've got a digit. That's a 4, that's a 5, this is a 6, this is a 3, this is a 7, because we know these add up to 10. The 7 overlaps here with the 3 clue, that must be the 2. We're going to get something in this column now as well. So we've used the 2 clue completely, we've used the 0 clue completely, we've not used the 8 clue completely, because we've got 5 here, 6 here. These two cells have to sum up to 8, and they can't be 5, 3, they can't be 2, 6, they are 1 and 7. So now we've got stuff going on in these 3 yellow squares because of the interactions. Let's look at this one first. We've got, now we don't know if this is an overlap or an underlap clue. If it's an overlap clue, if it's an overlap clue, we can't make that an 8, look, because these two are these two cells. So the only way of generating an overlap clue is with an 8 here, which overlaps in one cell. So that would force that to be an 8 because of the 8 clue. That repeats the 8 in the column. So this is not 8. This could be 9 though, because that would make those two cells have to add up to 8. And that is possible if that is a 6. Now the other option, of course, is that this is a small number and we have an underlap clue. Now that means that could be 1, 2 or 3 cells. So there aren't that many options for this cell. So an underlap clue, and in fact we can't put 6 in there because of this 6. So we can't underlap in one position. And we've got a 5 here, so we can't underlap in, so it would have to be a 3 cell. It has to be these 3 squares adding up to 8. And that's, it's beautiful, look, it's beautiful. If we put a 4 here, we have to make these 3 squares add up to 8, But we can't, because there's a 2 and a 4 in the column. Therefore 1, 2, 5 is ruled out, 1, 3, 4 is ruled out. This cannot be a 4. This has to be, was it a 9? This is a 9. Therefore this is a 6. And this clue is used. This clue is used. Okay, now, so let's come to these two. Yeah, this one, look. That's a 0 clue at the top. So this has to be a 1. Because we know it's a 0 clue, these two have to add up to 9. If this is 7, that becomes a 2, that clashes. So this has to be a 1, this is a 7, this is an 8, and we're starting to cook with gas. Oh, bobbins though, look, we've got a 7 clue. Okay, well we can still do something with this. This 7 is saying, look at these 7 cells. So we can't make this a 1. If this is a 1, there would be a gap of 1 cell, and this would have to contain a 7, which would clash. So this is an overlap clue, and you can make 7 in, well, we can't make it in 1 cell overlap, so it's a 2 or 3 cell overlap clue. So this has to be a 4 or a 5, and it's either overlapping with those 2 cells or these 3 cells. So not sure. Not sure how to do that yet. I don't think we can tell one way or the other. So where shall we look now? 9 clue here. We've got. Oh, I've not used this one. No, I've not used this clue. This clue is telling us it's an overlap clue, and it's a 3 overlap clue, and it's overlapping those 3 cells. These 3 cells have to add up to 9. Without using 4 and 5, they are 1, 2, and 6. So these 3 squares, therefore, are 3, 8, and 9. Now, we might be able to do stuff with all of these on this side of the grid now. Let's look at the 1, 2, and 6 clues first. So these all have to add up to 10. So this is 4, 8, 9. That can't be a 9. If this can't be a 9, this can't be a 1. Now we can go a bit further. A 2 clue. If these two add up to 10, and I make that a 9 and that a 1, I've not fulfilled the 2 clue. I've created a 1 cell overlap, but that overlap cell would be this cell, which doesn't contain a 2. So that can't be a 9. This can't be a 1. This is a 9 now. This is a 1. There must be a 9 in one of those 3 cells. Ooh, the 4s, look, they interact quite nicely on box 3. There's a 4 in one of those 2 cells. These 3 cells here have got to be 1, 2, and 7. That can't be a 2 because of the 2 here, so this can't be an 8. Sorry about this. Let me just. I'm sure there is a good thing to spot here if I can just get my head around what it is. 1, 7. Can that be a 7? If that's a 7, this has to be a 3, and the overlap would occur there, and it would clash with the 1. That can't be a 7. So this can't be a 3. This one as well. If that's a 4, this has to be a 6. The overlap is in this square. It would have to be a 1, and the 1 would clash. So actually we get an 8 there. That must be a 2. That's a 6. That must be a 4. The 6 and the 4 overlap in this square, which must be at 2. The 8 and the 2 overlap in this square, which must be a 1. So can we get further than that? So we know now with this 8-9 clue, there is a 1 in exactly one of those two positions. That gives us a 1 in the centre. That must be here. Now, look, that's just by Sudoku. There's a 1 in one of these 3 cells. That can't... Oh no, hang on. It's a 0 clue. So that's got to... These two have to add up to... Oh, hang on. Look at row 1. Look at row 1. The 0 clues are the key. We can't put a 9 at the top of a 0 column because the 2 together have to add to 9. So where do we put a 9? This one, and this one are all impossible. The 9 has to go there. That's beautiful because it gives me a 4 here by my pencil marks. 4 in one of those two cells. Now the 9 here, is that going to be useful in terms of what goes opposite it? So we're looking at an overlap clue. So this has to be a 2 or a 3 because you can't make 4 cells add up to 7. And if you use a 3 it doesn't work because if you use a 3 the 3 cells would have to be 1, 2 and 4 and they can't be because they include a 3. That is a 2. These 2 cells add to 7. This is a 5. What a puzzle this is. It's just mesmerising. 1-7 pair now in this column. Look, that must be a 2. So that must be a 1. Which means this is an 8. So this we have to put a 1 somewhere here. So if this is a 7 and this is a 3, the overlap is in this square and the 1 clashes. So this is not 7, this is 9, this is 1, that deals with the 1 clue, that deals with the 7 clue, look. The 7 and the 3 have to overlap at a 2, which is there. The 2 goes here by Sudoku. Feels like we must have almost done all of the... We must have nearly done all the clues now around the grid. So let's go through them. 8 we've done. We've done the 1. We've done the 1. We've done the 1. We've done the 2. We've done the 1. The 0 we've done. Yeah, we've done the 2 clue. 7 and 3 have to overlap on a 2, which they do. So actually every single row clue is done. The 9 column is done. Right, so now we've got to do with these 0 clues. This is where we have to look next. So 1, 4, 5, 6 into those squares. 1, 4, 5, 6. That can't be a 1. Neither of those can be a 4, look. That seems to be able to be anything, which is a bit annoying. So coming down to the grid, which, hang on, one of these is this 7, of course. Maybe it's this clue I meant to look at. So we were looking at the option of this being a 3-cell or a 2-cell clue. So if it's a 2-cell clue, it's these 2 cells that are overlapping. This would be a 4. There's a 1 in the column. This would have to be 2, 5. So this would be a 2. This would be a 5. If it's a 3-cell overlapping clue, it's these 3 squares, and these would have to be 1, 2, and 4. Right, so this square is always 2. This square is a 4 or a 5, depending on what that is. So that gives us a 4, 5 pair here. So by Sudoku, this square is a 2. So now I've basically used this clue up as well. So we're closing in on a situation where we're just going to be having to do Sudoku, I think. 3, 4 and 8 into those squares. That one can't be an 8. That one can be an 8. And that one... what's going on here? How can this be? This 3, 4, 6. So this has to be 1. That can't be a 4, because that would have to be a 5, and it can't be. So there's a 1, 5, 6 triple, and this is a 4. Is that right? This is a 4. This has to be... It does look right. I just didn't see it. So this has to be the 4, which means this is the 5. These two add up to 7. Six. 6 must be there by Sudoku. These two squares have got to include a 1, so we can do that. That must be the 1. That's going to have to be an 8. That makes that one an 8, look, by Sudoku. 8, oh no, damn, nearly misscanned that. 8 here locks an 8 into one of 2 positions. These squares are fixed. They've got to be 1, 5 and 9, and that means that one must be the 1. Yeah, that square's a 1 as well, that's why. Now this must be opposite an 8, that's nice. That's not 8 anymore. Oh, didn't want to miscolour it, just wanted to make it not an 8. This is a 1. This is not a 4. These two squares coming back to it are 5 and 9 in some order. That means that one has to be a 6. That's a 5. This is all so important because it just allows us to fill in the digits at the bottom. And now I think we have used all of the clues. So we just have to finish the Sudoku now. And we're going to finish this wonderful, wonderful puzzle. Okay. So the 5, 9 is resolvable. This must be a 5 by Sudoku. Those two squares there have got to be 6 and 8, and we can fill them in. These two squares, oh dear, those two squares have got to be 4 and 9, and we can also fill those in. That must be a 9 by Sudoku. 6, 4, that should be an 8. These need to be 7 and something. 4. 4 and 7. That's a 4. These two squares have got to be 6 and 9, which I can't do yet. Those two squares have got to be 3 and 7, which I also can't do yet. What about these two then? 5 and 7. No! Bobbins. Okay, let's have a look down this column then, where we need 3 and 7 again. That 7 finally helps us out a little bit, doesn't it? So that forces a 3 up there. That forces this to be a 7, 5, 7 triple. That should be an 8 to complete that box. These two squares have got to be 6 and 9. Oh, and I've broken the puzzle, haven't I? Have I? Oh no, I haven't broken it. Scanned it wrong. I thought I needed 6 and 9 in those two. 5 and 9 is a lot better. That is still going. Oh man, that was a horrible moment. Imagine breaking this puzzle now. I shouldn't speak too soon. 3 and 6. So 6, 3, 3, and therefore 4 here. Check. And it's correct. Wow. Nylimb, that is something else. I loved that. I mean, it's sort of... It's so interesting that you can just literally get nothing for 15 minutes and you have to sort of invent the logic for the puzzle. And this side of the grid being resolvable, wow, just superb. Absolutely loved it. Guys, let me know in the comments what you thought about the puzzle, and we'll be back later with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.